Today's episode is brought to you by Mazars. SoundCartel. For some business owners, the idea of putting up their prices is terrifying. The fear that customers will go elsewhere. They get trapped in what Andrew Griffiths calls a poverty mentality. And that's where they stay, nose to the grindstone, fed up, exhausted, and never truly getting ahead. From SoundCartel, I'm Nicole Goodman, and this is Business Essentials Daily. Andrew Griffiths is Australia's leading business author and an international keynote speaker. After years of considering this all-too-common pricing trap, one which he succumbed to himself back in the day, he released a book about it titled Someone Has to Be the Most Expensive. Why not make it you? And why not? It takes courage, he says, and a process of transforming your business to high value. But once there, people will want to spend more money with you because, after all, you'll be worth it. First, that poverty mentality trap. What is it, Heather Dawson asks Andrew? And more importantly, how do we get out of it?
I actually met many businesses where even if they were fully booked, they wouldn't be making a profit simply because they charge so little for what it is that they do. So that's a typical kind of sign or symptom. I see people that have a resistance to putting up their pricing. They don't value what it is that they do. So we can see their value, but they don't necessarily see their value in there. So it impacts in a lot of different ways. The problem is too that it becomes a train of thought, a way of thinking in a business it's quite hard to break out of. And that's probably the hardest thing that I encounter a lot is that whole, once it's got its kind of hooks into someone, if they've got a poverty mentality in life and they take it into their business, it makes business so much harder.
But shifting from being the cheapest to being the most expensive, a pretty hard ask, Andrew, because so many business people believe that they just won't get the work in a competitive world. Isn't that right?
It is, and that's an interesting thing. So there's a couple of things that have to change, and most of it is a psychological change. I hear this all of the time. I hear people say, but my customers can't afford more, or the market is down, and there's all the reasons why. And my first thing is, are we dealing with facts or are we dealing with fiction? It's like, I think this. The real problem, though, is when you've been a price-driven business and you tend to be charging what you think people can afford as opposed to what they can actually afford, and you're being the cheapest, you attract cheap clients. All right? When cheap clients lack loyalty, they refer other cheap clients. It's never cheap enough. When your client base is coming to you purely based on price, you are giving it away. It's not cheap enough. And that in its own right is the hurdle because, yes, to shift from being the cheapest to being the most expensive or at least charging what you're worth, one of the things you've got to do is you've got to be prepared to let go of stuff. And you've got to be prepared to let go of the clients that aren't prepared to pay. You've got to be prepared to let go of limiting beliefs. You've got to be prepared to let go of the fiction, the story we tell ourselves rather than the facts. There are always people who are prepared to pay more, but we've got to change our customers. And that's a big, big thing for people to overcome when they're comfortable. And we get comfortable, learned helplessness, right? We get used to being cheap. We get used to dealing with that kind of client. We get used to underselling our services. When someone like me comes along and says, well, okay, what about if we want to start charging what you're actually worth? And you've got to now lose those customers, probably lose some of your staff because they won't make the transition. You're probably going to have to change your business name. You're probably going to have to change what it is you're delivering. It's a little bit too hard to do that as opposed to staying in the poverty space. They become older and poverty in their business stays. And I see this in every corner of the world, Heather, all around the world, in businesses in every industry.
Okay, well, talking of poverty mentality, Andrew, you admit that you've been on that journey yourself.
Absolutely.
So what happened with you? How did you get out of it?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I grew up as a child with, in reality, I say the line that I spent the first 18 years of my life being told that I had very little value and then spending the rest of my life proving otherwise. I bought my first business when I was 17 going on 18 that we've spoken about on the show many a time. And what I did was I ran the business the way that the guy before me ran it. He was a crazy Canadian guy, and he was totally price-driven. Really, it was for him, he didn't make any money, and it was just... that was how he ran a business. He didn't really expect to make any money. He didn't know any better. He wasn't a businessman. He was a dive instructor, right? And so I bought it. So I ran it exactly the same way. He was my business role model, so I just did everything that he did, and accordingly made no money and proceeded to go broke. And it was only through a series of strange situations and opportunities that I had some really great mentors who showed me about what value really is. And in reality, my book is about value. You can't charge the most and deliver the least. I use a line in there that you can't put lipstick on a wombat. And wombat's a wombat. You put lipstick on it, it's still a wombat, right? And it's this wonderful thing of saying, well, because people go, okay, so you want me to just go and triple my prices? And I go, no, you can't just triple your prices when people are used to the service you offer, the business you are, rah, rah, rah. You've got to follow a bit of a process. And this is what it requires. We've got to start somewhere. So I had to retrain all of my business thinking, and I had to put a little bit of trust in it. And I had to, as I was saying a minute ago, I had to lose some stuff. I had to lose those cheap customers. I had to completely renovate my dive store and double the prices, triple the prices of my dive gear, my dive courses. And ironically, for me, this was many years ago. This was in 1988, I think it was, or 85, 1,000 years ago. What I charged for a dive course when I first bought the dive shop is what people are still charging for dive courses today, 35 years later. So that tells you that there's a lot of poverty mentality in that particular industry. So it was a big shift of thinking and ideas. I'm not sure if I answered your question there, but I went on a rave.
Well, the answers are in your book, and you've been through the process yourself. So tell us how you moved from being a cheapo operator to being the most expensive. What sort of process do you need to go through?
Some of the basics. I've got a bit of a 10-step process, but to sum it up, first and foremost, you've got to really make the commitment. You can't just turn around. Like McDonald's can't charge $30 for a Big Mac because people aren't going to pay $30 for a Big Mac. Yet in Las Vegas, there are people that will pay $5,000 for one of the hamburgers from the Wynn. $5,000, got truffles and all this kind of stuff in it. And you go, well, who would buy a $5,000 hamburger? Plenty of people. So the moral to the story is we're not trying to get every customer. We're not trying to get everyone. We're trying to change our customer base, and we're trying to change the value that we're delivering. The more value we deliver, we're going to attract those kind of people. So I start off by saying you've got to rethink your vision. What is your plan? What is it that you really want to achieve? What are you tired of accepting in your business? What needs to change? This doesn't matter whether you're an accountant, a lawyer, candlestick maker, boat maker, vet, whatever it might be. The concept works. Okay, this is where I'm at. I want to charge more. What does that look like? Why do you want to change? Really you've got to get to, I'm exhausted, I'm tired, I've had enough, I'm never getting ahead, I want to leave a legacy, whatever it might be. And then we've got to work through that whole process and say, okay, well, once we've got our big why, then we've got to start looking at the other parts of our business and say, right, well, we need a plan. How does that look? As I say, you can't just triple your rates. We've got to turn around and say, okay, well, what do we want to do? Well, we want to start charging more for what we do. Maybe we don't want to be the most expensive. Maybe that's a little bit too much of a leap. All right, but we want to be charging more. Well, okay, you need to deliver more. You need to deliver more value. Okay, what does that look like? And there's a number of areas that I talk about in that space, from experience to credibility to all those things. If you do want to be the most expensive, then I use the line, someone's got to be the most expensive, it may as well be you. But if you're going to be the most expensive, you have to be the best. So we've got to define, what does being the best actually mean? What does that really look like? How can someone sell an $85,000 walking stick or a $300,000 desk or grow a $200 mango or be the most expensive dentist in the country? What is it they're doing? So we talk about, what does being the best mean and what do you really need to be able to do it? And then I say, well, you can't just, again, put lipstick on the wombat. You often have to make a dramatic change. So, for example, with my dive shop, we shut it down, got rid of all the cheap gear, bought expensive gear, turned it into an art gallery. Got these beautiful underwater prints, made it some baby sky blue thing, did all this stuff and changed it completely. And that's what it needed. A number of years ago, I was running a marketing company and I'd fallen back into my old habits and I'd gone to being the cheapest again. I don't know how that happened, but I was there. And I went making no money, working 80 hours a week, wrong customers, rah, rah. And again, I decided I've got to change this. So in that situation, I changed my company name, I moved office, went to the right part of town, made dramatic changes, and it was the best thing I'd ever did because I'd already known about how to overcome the poverty mentality, but it's an insidious little critter that's hard to get rid of when it's in your genes. So, okay, don't put lipstick on a wombat, make those fundamental changes, and then, of course, there's other steps that you go through. Does that give you enough of an idea?
It sure does. It takes courage, doesn't it?
You know what? It actually does, and that's a really great point because a lot of people kind of misinterpret what I'm perhaps saying, or not a lot of people. Some people say to me, oh, it's a book about making lots of money. I go, actually, it's a book about delivering great value. And to do what I'm suggesting, to become the most expensive, if you build a business like that, there are so many rewards. You're future-proofed, you get through recessions. The businesses that are most profitable obviously survive the toughest of times. The businesses that have got no money in them, as we've just seen, go broke a week after there's a crisis of some sort. But you're so right, that term, it takes courage. And what I find when I'm working with people to help them do this transition, they need a steady hand on the rudder because it's pretty scary when all of a sudden you're having customers going, well, if you're going to charge that, I'm going elsewhere. And you're going, yeah, but you need to lose those customers. They're the ones you've got to let go. Oh, but I'm comfortable with them. I'm used to them.
But Andrew, you've got to get the new customers as well, haven't you?
You do, but the nice thing, Heather, is that once you start to charge more for what it is you do, once you become the most expensive, we live in a world where people are prepared to pay for quality. So this is the whole point. You can't charge the most and deliver the least. And now I've got so many stories that I use in the book about we live in a world where people will find you if you're the best at what you do. They can do that now through the intranets and the webses, through technology, through social media, through word of mouth. They will find us because there are those customers out there who want the best, and that's what they're looking for. So we're going, the pack is over here. That's where everyone else is fighting. We want to go over here. Smaller customer base, smaller group of people, but an amazing group of people that just want to deal with the best. And as I say, I've seen this, I've been looking at this around the world in the work that I do for the last 10, 15 years. I've really been observing this, which is why I wrote this book. And I've got all of these businesses that I see, like, why would someone line up for 6 hours to go to a barbecue joint in Austin, Texas? Who's going to queue up for 6 hours to go to a restaurant? Every single day there's a restaurant called Franklin Grill that has a queue of people, hundreds of people, that literally turn up with their laptops and their umbrellas and they are waiting for this place to open. And you look at it, how can someone, who would do that? And you go, well, hundreds of people every single day. Why? Because they're the best.
That was Andrew Griffiths, entrepreneurial futurist, keynote speaker and best-selling author. This episode of Business Essentials Daily is produced by the team at SoundCartel. Thanks for listening. I'm Nicole Goodman. We'll bring you more Be Daily tomorrow. Follow at BE Daily Podcast across social media and head to bedaily.com.au for more from the Business Essentials Daily podcast. SoundCartel. This episode was brought to you by Mazars. To find out more, visit mazars.com.au. That's mazars.com.au.